going to officially welcome everybody, and a special shout out to our fantastic guest, Cynthia, today. Fantastic to have you here. For those who don't know me, I'm Angela Shelton, CEO of Answers for Associations, where we connect association professionals through innovative events, learning outcomes, and solutions designed to inspire growth and collaboration. We have thrown a question out to the chat box. No one's answering, so I'm just going to pressure everybody into sharing their thoughts. I'm going to share a word what I think about recruitment. Overwhelming, but I talk about it from a small business, so I know that everyone's going to have their different take on it. But before we begin today's webinar, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting today. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I would like to then officially introduce our fantastic guest today, Cynthia Harris. Cynthia comes to us from Heart Talent. She has so much expertise in talent attraction, and she's been working really closely with our Answers members to really help their leaders build strong, cohesive teams. So on that note, Cynthia, I'm going to hand it over to you. Are we ready to go with our...
Yeah, I'm just looking at my presenter screen. Have you got... Hopefully you can see my slide now.
Yep, we can see. Oh, yep, there we go.
Is that good?
Yep.
What can you see? Ange, can you see my slide?
We can see your screen. We can also see your notes. So you may want to hide
Excellent. That's not what we want, is it?
Now, I have to be everybody. I have to take responsibility for this. I didn't send Cynthia the right link, so you're going to have to be incredibly
patient with me.
Patient and forgiving with me. This is at our end. We're going through a tech stack renewal at the moment, so we're using quite a few different programs, but we have Cynthia's presentation up. So, on that note, I'm going to bow out and hand it over to the wonderful Cynthia.
Thanks so much, Angela, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate you spending some time. I will check the chat a couple of times, but as you can see, we've got some challenges with technology this morning, so this afternoon. So if you do have a burning question, please pop it into the chat and I'll ask Angela to keep an eye on that. We might tackle them during the presentation, or we might tackle them towards the end. Thanks so much for joining us today, and to Answers for hosting. I will do a quick introduction to myself and the Heart business, and while we do that, I was going to ask you to let me know a little bit about you. So I'm keen to understand your role in the organisation that you work for, and if you have any burning questions or things that you'd like to cover off today. So while we do that, my name is Cynthia. I'm the founder and director of a business called Heart Talent. We are a small business supporting non-profit organisations and non-profit leaders to build happy, engaged and high-performing teams. We do that through a range of recruitment marketing and employer brand solutions. And what I'd like to share with you today is a little bit of an overview of some research that we did recently into the state of talent attraction in the non-profit sector, and specifically how you can be competitive and attract the right talent in what we all know is a very challenging and, as Angela mentioned, sometimes overwhelming landscape. I've been working in recruitment for 19 years. I celebrated that milestone a couple of weeks ago. That makes me a veteran. I started my career in corporate communications, and certainly during the last 19 years, I've seen a huge shift in the dynamic between employer and employee. And I think that's probably the biggest change. And that really plays well into the research insights and the tips and advice that I'm going to share today. So we know that talent challenges exist. They are a given. We've got a skills shortage, we've got a tight labour market, and what I'm on a mission to do is help non-profit employers and leaders to understand and tackle the things that we can control in the talent landscape. We can't necessarily control skills shortages. We can't necessarily, control competition for talent, but let's look at how we can improve our approach and our outcomes today. The research that we did, I'll touch on it a few times, and I'll certainly share a link towards the end of this webinar to our research. I'm proud to say this is an Australian first piece of research where we did a comprehensive review of the recruitment, marketing and talent attraction landscape across the non-profit sector. Our research is based on more than 400 conversations with non-profit leaders, as well as a review of more than 200 organisations, and I'll delve a little bit deeper into that. This is really important work that I'm proud of. Of course, the non-profit sector is not insignificant. It employs 1.3 million people, which means it constitutes 10% of the Australian workforce. And with $1.55 billion in revenue, that makes up about 8% of Australia's GDP. So I'm really proud of the research that we've done and how it will support you to better understand the talent landscape. We're going to talk briefly about the modern talent landscape and the modern work landscape. I'll share some insights broadly about the Australian workplace, and then I'll dive into Heart Talent's research into the state of recruitment in the non-profit sector. I'm then going to challenge us all to reimagine recruitment and shift our mindset to these new dynamics and to adjust to some of the insights that I'm sharing. And then I'll share a case study towards the end. I do need to go quite quickly because we started a few minutes late. So forgive me, I'm a fast talker anyway. So hopefully, I know this is being recorded so you can come back and have a look. What I'd like to do is just talk briefly about the evolution of employment and the employment contract. I'm not talking about the contract that is, signed on a piece of paper with all the contractual things that go into it. I'm talking about the concept and the notion of that relationship between employer and employee. For most of the 20th century, we were operating under what Mercer refers to as the loyalty contract. Work was about, being paid, putting food on the table. It was all about financial incentives and job security. And so you worked hard in exchange for a lifetime of, stability, I guess, and loyalty. Over the last 2 decades, there's countless amounts of research globally that talks about what people have started to want and need from their employer, and a job has changed. We started thinking about a sense of belonging, camaraderie, purpose, and meaning, and that really is encapsulated in the concept of an engagement contract. Yes, job security and professional development and purpose still matter, but even more recently, we've evolved into being interested in work-life balance and health and well-being of our employees. And as individuals, and I guess I'm speaking to you today as leaders, but we're all employees as well. As individuals, we want to make work for us. And that's what we refer to as the lifestyle contract. So that's just a tiny bit of a historic look before we look at current Australian workplace statistics. I think Anne shared some of these in an email earlier this week. 4 in 10 employers in Australia report recruitment difficulties. That's an average figure throughout 2023. And the source of that, if anyone works in people and culture, is the Australian HR Institute. So that's Australia-wide research. The federal government, I think since COVID, has been doing a monthly review of recruitment outlook and recruitment statistics. And that research shows that 45% of organisations cannot fill a job within a month. We'll come back to time to fill a little bit later. Across the country, average turnover in Australian workplaces is 15%, and 1 in 3 employers report turnover of 20% or above. There was also a report released earlier this year that suggested 1 in 5 people are either actively seeking or considering leaving their job in the next 12 months. So all of this is to say that, yes, the market has softened a little bit. Yes, it's not as crazy as it was in those post-COVID closed border periods, but we're still in a fairly competitive landscape and people are still on the move. That final point there, average tenure, this is really interesting, between 2013 and 2023, average tenure dropped by half. We used to stay in our jobs for around 7 years, 10 years ago. Average tenure in 2023 was 3 years and 4 months. And it's even less for millennials, who are, of course, the largest cohort in our workforce. So let's look at some insights for leaders, and specifically if there's anyone that has particular challenges that you're facing in your organisation in terms of talent. I am trying to view the chat box, but forgive me if I haven't picked those up, and I'm happy for someone to jump in and share if they'd like to. These are the challenges that we found when we did our research, and actually this is not our research, this is PwC. So the Australian PwC non-profit survey in 2023 showed that 75% of CEOs across Australia and New Zealand in this sector are reporting adverse impacts from widespread skills shortages. Now, the skills shortage has been, very closely documented. It's obviously eased a little bit since the COVID period, but this research, obviously, which was published at the beginning of this year, shows that it's still a challenge. Now, if we dive into Heart Talent's research, there are three main themes that emerged when we spoke to those 400 non-profit leaders. Aside from all of the change and the skills shortage, the first one was intense competition for talent. 63% of leaders said that the competition for talent is their number one challenge. And 1 in 4, I think it was 26%, reported that they definitely had lost a preferred candidate to another job offer on at least one occasion. So competition for talent, it is a given. It's eased a little bit, but it's not going away. The second challenge that leaders told us about was increased salary expectations. And a little over a third of leaders believe that they struggle to offer competitive salaries. Now, of course, in non-profit organisations, budgets are limited. I understand that people need to consider responsible use of funds, but perhaps these factors are sometimes at odds with the ethos of paying what it takes to attract the best talent to your business. And the final point there, we'll touch on this again a little bit later, but it goes without saying that the non-monetary aspects of your offer really do matter. And I'm not just talking about flexible working and leave. We'll touch on that a little bit further when we talk about employee value proposition. The third theme that emerged from our research is low brand recognition. A little under half of non-profit leaders explained that they struggle to find the right talent through their own recruitment methods. So both the size and the quality of their talent pool was a challenge. And through the research conversations, but also anecdotally when I'm speaking to leaders, small organisations quite often speak about getting lost in the noise on job boards or online channels when they need to hire. There is a lot of noise out there, and that's why I want us to reimagine recruitment and, I guess, adjust our approach to the modern work landscape. I'll just briefly mention this, and I'll leave this on the screen for a moment. We've talked about the fact that there are a lot of things in the talent landscape that we can't control, and I am absolutely about helping you understand and tackle the things that you can control. But I'd like you to remember, and I'll let you sit with this for a moment, being competitive isn't always about being better. Better is incredibly subjective. We are all individuals, and what is better for me may not be better for you. So we'll come back to that a little bit later in the webinar. But for now, I'd like to dive a little deeper into the Heart Talent research across the state of talent attraction in the non-profit sector. I should have said at the beginning, I use the language of talent attraction and recruitment interchangeably to mean exactly the same thing, but there is a very important reason why I use the language of talent attraction, and that will reveal itself as we go through. So our research was conducted throughout 2023 and the early months of 2024, and we did a comprehensive review, and this is, I guess, separate to those 400 conversations with leaders. That was the qualitative part of our research. We did a comprehensive review of the recruitment, marketing and employer brand presence of more than 200 organisations across Australia. To do that, we looked at all external or publicly facing aspects of their brand. There's obviously a lot more to your employer brand than this, but the things that we looked at were job advertising, careers pages, social media, and employee reviews. And so I'd like to tackle each of those separately. There is a whole lot more detail in our report, but I'm going to give you just one slide and top-line findings around the state of talent attraction in the Australian non-profit sector. So firstly, job advertising. It is kind of a given, Captain Obvious here. Job boards are the go-to channel for non-profits when they need to hire. But they do have some limitations. And what we found is that 2 out of 3 organisations only use one job board. 75% don't include a salary or a salary range in their jobs, in their ads. And 3 in 4 ads that we looked at during that period include cliches and buzzwords. Now, I know that there are some really desirable words to use like passionate and purpose-led and impact in job ads. I guess my point here is that they're overused, and what we need to try and do with our job ads is stand out to be different and authentic and try not to use the same language that could appear in the next 10 or 20 or 100 ads on job boards. And finally, and this is really, really interesting, and we will come back to this last point, only 30% of the job ads that we review really truly addressed what's in it for the employee. And that goes back to what I said earlier about that change dynamic between employer and employee. As I said, more detail in the report, but there are top line findings about job advertising in the non-profit sector. The next section I'd like to talk about is the careers page. On the left are some of our key stats. So this is probably one of the most surprising findings from our research. 1 in 3 employers in this space do not have a dedicated careers page. This is absolutely bonkers. Obviously, your website is an owned marketing channel, and forgive me for using marketing language there. Unlike social media or employee reviews or the job boards that you advertise on, your organisation owns the website, and to not have a dedicated careers page is a huge missed opportunity. 1 in 4 of the careers pages that we did look at include employee content. And there are some examples of this type of content in the report. But what I mean by that is content that's specifically about or crafted around the stories of employees. It's all very well and good for the people and culture team or the CEO or the marketing team to write the content that's on the careers page. But the voice of your employees is going to be far more powerful in attracting the right talent and connecting with them when you need to hire. And only 1 in 5 of these careers pages includes employee videos. I had an EDM land in my inbox this morning about employer brand and recruitment marketing. And it reminded me, we all know, everyone in marketing knows that video works. 95% of messaging is remembered when it's delivered in a video. So that is also a largely untapped opportunity to really engage with your talent audience on your powerful owned marketing channel. The next area we looked at was employee reviews, and specifically in Australia, we're looking at Seek, Indeed, and Glassdoor. There are other review sites out there, but they are the 3 that seem to be most commonly used and be most prevalent in the Australian market. And this is also astounding. Only 51% of employers in this sector have employee reviews online. That's also a huge missed opportunity. And my number one, tip here, and it isn't in the latter slide, which is a takeaway, some tips for you to take away. My number one tip here is if you've got happy, engaged employees, ask them to write a review. Yes, there is a risk that you'll get, negative reviews as well. I think we all as adults understand that, social proof and that user-generated content, you're always going to get, some people that aren't entirely happy. But if you've just done a survey or you've just done a one-on-one with one of your teams and they're really happy, and if your organisation doesn't already have, a presence on these sites, or it does and there are no current reviews, which was definitely something that we found in the research, it's a huge opportunity. User-generated content, I'm using some marketing language here again, is incredibly powerful. It's very hard to hide from, people power and social proof and word of mouth. So I think there's a great opportunity for organisations and employers to embrace employee reviews as part of a proactive employer brand effort. Really encouragingly, 30% of the reviews that we found, or the organisations that do have a presence on these sites, have an average 4 or 5-star rating. That's fantastic. But it's not being leveraged largely. It's not being leveraged in recruitment content. It's not that authentic, positive sentiment that is the voice of your employees is incredibly powerful. I think I did have a slide here or a quote, but from Richard Branson, which got cut because I was trying to stick to time. But we all know reputation matters, and your employees are, your number one audience. So if they're happy, please encourage them to use those review sites, because you can leverage that when you need to hire. And finally, a huge untapped opportunity. This is absolutely astounding. 80% of employers in this space have no talent-focused content on their social media channels. Most organisations are active across all social media. Most organisations are quite proactive on LinkedIn as well. But what we found is that 4 out of 5 are not leveraging, again, the voice of their employees or the story of their employees on these channels. When you consider that 82% of the Australian workforce are active social media users, this is, again, another untapped opportunity. And I guess what I'd say here is I'm not talking simply about sharing a job on social media. That should be a given. I'm talking about a sort of an always-on proactive approach to connecting with your talent audience and having talent-focused content on those social media channels. I'm not sure if this is out of date. I'm sure it's gone up since I last read, but 1 hour and 51 minutes, that's the amount of time 82% of us spend on social media on average every day. So I think this is about showing up where people are online, and even when you're not hiring, and we'll touch on that in a moment. Angela, I know you love infographics, so I had to throw one into today's presentation. This is about the modern job search. As you can see at the top there, and we could probably add a third section to this at the top of, when we used to look for jobs in Saturday paper and post our CV. Obviously, that's quite far behind us now. But the old school job search I'm talking about is I'm an active job seeker. I search online. I see a text-based job ad, and I apply. It's very similar, very simple and quite linear. Today's job search is absolutely non-linear. And again, I'm going to link this to marketing. There was a report, I think it's about 10 years old now, but there was a report that Google released about the 0 moment of truth. And it's about online consumer behavior and the path that we go through to buy a product. And it's very, very long, and it took me quite a while to get through, but obviously Google are very well resourced when it comes to research. But essentially it's talking about, I guess the key takeaway and the key box plot for me was the messy middle. I don't just go online, look at one product and buy it. And the job search is the same, and the two sides of that latter part of the infographic, the pink section there, are an active job seeker and a passive job seeker. But it shows that the path is absolutely non-linear, and even some of the things that the passive job seeker does, the active job seeker does as well. They talk to friends, they look at review, they look at your career site. It's certainly not a linear process, and I think it's really important to consider this when you're hiring. Just to be completely transparent, I did not create this. I've recreated it in our brand colours, but as you can see, the source there is a really interesting site that you might want to check out. It's an employer brand platform for early career professionals called The Muse out of the US. Really great examples of recruitment marketing. So what I'd like to do is challenge you to reimagine recruitment. I've shared with you, some information and some context around the evolution of employment. I've shared with you some current Australian workplace statistics. I've shared with you some research specific to your sector. And I think, traditional hiring methods are not necessarily serving all hiring teams or organisations. The data on that is quite clear. I'd like you to reimagine recruitment, not as a process, but as an opportunity. Not as a transaction, but as the start of a relationship. And if I can be so crass, not about putting bums on seats, about engaging hearts and minds. Recruitment is marketing. Spoiler alert, I think that was in some of the material you received to sign up for this webinar. But this is really the essence of the shift in mindset that I'd like to encourage us to take. The consumer is the talent that you are trying to attract, engage and retain. And this webinar and is very much about recruitment, but of course there is absolutely an interaction here with talent engagement, employee engagement and retention. The product is not the people. The product is the job that you want them to choose and to keep. And, certainly if I think about, back nearly 20 years when I started in recruitment, and it was a bit of a baptism by fire. It's not an easy job, as Angela shared. It's, overwhelming sometimes. I remember saying to myself and saying to friends, gosh, the product is the people. It's really hard. You can't control people. That is all true. But actually, I think in the modern landscape, we really need to think about the product as the job that we want people to choose and to keep. And again, this overlaps now into that retention space. You're not buying, you're selling. And I'm sorry if this is controversial, if anyone has the terminology of talent acquisition in their job title, that I want us to forget that. I really think we should never, ever have adopted that, that mindset and that terminology, because employers don't acquire talent. Recruitment is not a buying activity. When you need to hire, because of that change in dynamic and because of those statistics that you can see about turnover and tenure, this is about persuading people. It's about, selling the product. And I don't mean selling in a nasty way. It still needs to be authentic, but selling your product, the job, and your employer offer. And so that's where I get the language of winning hearts and minds rather than putting bums on seats. So I'd like to encourage you to think about this new mindset and the new mission of recruitment as winning hearts and minds. And just for a moment, put your employee hat on rather than your leader hat. We are all employees, and we know that the right job and the right employer, equally so the wrong job and the wrong employer, is such an important decision in life. It's a, it can be a life-changing decision. And I talk about people looking for a new job as an expression of optimism. If I go out and look for a new job, perhaps sometimes it's because I've been made redundant or I've, moved geographically. But if I'm going out to look for a new job, it's an expression of optimism. I'm looking for something better, something different. And getting it right can be absolutely life-changing. And I think we need to, as employers, we need to kind of use that filter when we are hiring to think about, this is a big ticket decision, which is why we need to think about the talent as the consumer, because ultimately, yes, you choose to offer them the job or not when you get to the end of your process, but ultimately they get to just decide whether to accept your offer. So when we're hiring, I want you to think about the goal as being connection. And this is where the marketing piece comes in. You need to use experiences, stories, positive sentiment, engaging content to create a real connection with the right audience. We talk a lot about the best person for the job. I would challenge us to also think about the right person for the job. So we need to think like marketers, and I guess perhaps this could be a topic for another webinar, but I think we need to think really clearly and really critically about the employee value proposition. Just like associations need to are working hard on their member value proposition, just as you communicate and engage with members, you really need to think about talent as a critical audience. Now, if we do this, we can go one step further and think about the fact that you're actually always recruiting, even when you're not hiring. And this is where, I guess, recruitment being a marketing exercise and thinking about, your employer brand and your employee value proposition and being really proactive and intentional about this means that you can be, and utilising those channels that, that I highlighted better than the research shows that many organisations do. In the era of talent, I'd like to encourage leaders and organisations to be thinking or coming from a mindset of always recruiting, even when you're not hiring. So, Angela, are there any questions in the chat? I can think I can see you, but I can't see any other things in the chat box that I need to address. Is there anything that any questions?
No questions at the moment, but this is actually a great time to say, if you do have a question, pop it in the Q&A, because you can now take advantage of having Cynthia here. Or what we better yet could do? If anybody wants to grab the mic, we can do a live question. Yeah. So I'm throwing it out there to anybody that has a burning question, a hot topic, something that you may not get the opportunity again if you don't take it today. Do you know one question, Cynthia? Can I ask a question to kick it off? I am really interested in terms of the recruitment space. I know it's quite different from small to large organizations, and I've always seemed to gravitate more towards the small, and I've been recruited from small business, and I have recruited into my small business. You talk about the videos, and I know that you do this so well, but how do you get that out into a sea of people when it's quite diverse in terms of what you're wanting to offer people? Like, you can put it out into LinkedIn, but have you maybe got any hot topics around the content you can put into that video? In terms of like, where should you be when you do the video? What sort of tone? Should it be friendly? Should it be formal? I'm interested.
So this crosses over into employer brand, which is one of the themes in what I'm talking about, but it could also be a whole nother webinar. I think for me, the tone needs to be true to your organisation. And so we talk about, and a lot of the professional development I do for myself is to look at what's happening overseas in the employer brand space. It's a relatively new field for the Australian workforce, and it's probably only some of the very big corporates that have employer brand or recruitment marketing teams. But the consensus in the international community is that the tone of voice and the language and the messaging, although it needs to, and I'm about to share a case study that will show some themes of this as well, although it needs to speak to the audience, the talent that you're trying to attract, it absolutely must be aligned with the brand and the voice of your organisation. So I think this most sensible and safe way to approach doing talent-focused content is to speak in the language and the voice and the personality of your association's brand. So, and this is where people and culture teams and marketing and comms teams or member engagement teams really need to work, hand in glove. Again, in the international community, community, there is a whole lot of chatter about where recruitment, yes, recruitment is part of a people and culture or traditionally a HR function, but there is a whole lot of overlap with comms and marketing. So to answer your question, it needs to be aligned with your organisation's brand. I personally, depending on your brand personality, and I personally don't think it needs to be super corporate. I don't think it needs to be a high-end production. I've tussled with this myself over the last couple of years because we obviously like to practice what we preach, and we do video job ads for all of the campaigns that we manage. And we did do some shooting in a studio with a proper crew a couple of years ago. But what I find, and it's kind of personal preference as well, because we work with mainly small to medium organisations. Personal preference is to for it to just be really raw and authentic. So you'll see me. This is a real background. This is actual wallpaper. Most of the videos that I publish, I've got this in the background. Occasionally, I might go outside if I want to, shed some light on the matter. But I think it's just about being authentic. At the end of the day, we need to think about the talent as the consumer and their individuals, right? I think even we're doing a CEO recruitment project at the moment. I approach that exactly the same in terms of the style of the marketing as I would for a marketing executive. So hopefully that answers the question.
Oh, no, that's brilliant. Look, I'll watch over the Q&A if anybody's got questions, then I'll get you to share the case study.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do now is jump into the case study that we promised to share with you today, which is around marketing-led recruitment. I just need to move that chat box out of the way so I can see my notes. So I've thrown a lot of statistics at you. I've talked to you about time to fill. I've talked to you about engagement with content. I've talked to you about, the channels and how we could use them better. This is a recent case study. We've got quite a few of them, but, the stats on this one were pretty exciting to share. I want to tell you a story about how we increased the client's talent pool and helped them secure the right talent. And again, I'm using right rather than best, but in this case, she was absolutely the best talent in the country as well, in just 18 days. So in this case, it's a small national non-profit organisation. They are based in Sydney, but they have a national footprint. They have good brand recognition, very well known and respected in their space. And they've been on quite a significant growth journey. The CEO has been in place for 5 years. I've been working with them throughout that time. And just to paint a picture, even though they are small, they've increased their revenue 4 times, their fundraising revenue 4 times in the last 5 years, and really mobilised a really strong community of members and followers and supporters around them. So they're small but known. They placed an ad on Seek and they received 26 applications, none of which were suitable for interview. And so then they called us. And I'm really proud of the results that we're able to achieve with this. I'm going to share the results first, and then I'm going to go back and unpack some elements of the campaign to show you what it looked like in action. We took their candidate pool, I beg your pardon, in the first 9, or maybe it was 10 days, our campaign, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the campaign in a moment, achieved engagement with 1,800 people. So that is not impressions, that is engagements, and we were across about 5 different platforms online. We, as part of every campaign, I talk a lot about recruitment marketing campaigns and recruitment being a marketing exercise, but we also do strategic outreach. It's a nicer way to say headhunting. We never, ever get this response. We got 1 in 3 people respond to our strategic outreach, which is unheard of. Usually it's 1 or 2 in 10, but I got a 3rd response. Across all of our campaign materials, we achieved a 7.25% click-through rate, CTR, using some marketing language again there. Average, or what is considered good click-through rate, obviously varies a lot from sector. What you would expect in e-commerce if you're selling products online is very different if you're a service-based business. But as a basic benchmark, 4 to 6% I think is considered a decent click-through rate. So really delighted to have achieved that click-through rate. We took their applicant pool of 26 to 139 people. And but it's important to note here, I guess, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. So just to give some more context to that, at least 20 of those people were suitable, matched, quality talent who on paper looked like they could be suitable for the job and were engaged in our interview process. It took us 18 days to conduct interviews, shortlist, and work with the hiring team to secure the right candidate. So, that is, and look, we've got results like that across lots of different searches, particularly in the last 6 to 12 months, using this very focused marketing-led approach. I'll unpack that a little bit more and tell you what it looks like in action. I appreciate that this copy might be a little bit small on the screen, but what it looks like in action, these are excerpts from the job ad that we posted. It was a branded job ad that identified the organisation. That can be done in either way. When you partner with a recruiter, obviously you can put your brand on the ad, or you can choose not to. We refer to that as a blind ad. It's very much up to each individual organisation to decide. But what I'd like to point out here is audience-centric copy. And if any of you work with copywriters, the other tip here is it's direct response copywriting. It speaks directly to me as an audience, if I'm the ideal person that might want to apply for this job. And direct response copywriting is typically questions that inspire action. So are you an experienced program manager with a background in healthcare or medical research? Are you ready to join the team tackling the biggest public health challenge of our time? One of the biggest issues that we see, and it's everywhere, and it's a drum that I bang on social media all the time, is that most job ads start with a blurb about the organisation. It's not about you as an employer. It's about the audience that you're trying to attract. So the number one piece of advice here is audience-centric copy. Very early in the piece, I think you need to define the purpose of the role and the organisation. And I guess that might sound at odds with not starting your ad with a blurb about the organisation. But if you're cutting and pasting from a job description or cutting and pasting from your website, that's not a great job ad. That is not engaging. It's not compelling. It's about connecting what the purpose of the job is with the purpose of the organisation, and it still needs to be authentic, but in a really emotive way, going back to what I said earlier about the goal is to create connection. So describe the purpose, but do it in a really punchy, concise, compelling way. And then talking about compelling, I think I've said that word 3 times in the last 30 seconds. Every single job ad that we publish on behalf of our clients has a title, "What's on offer?" Now, not only does this need to be compelling, which is, a given, but how you articulate that offer and where you articulate that offer in your recruitment marketing is really important. We did some tests, it was mostly last year actually, about where we positioned that section, "What's on offer?" And it's kind of a given, but it doesn't happen a lot. The earlier in your job ad you tell the employee or the candidate what's in it for them, the better. I don't think I should need to read to the end of a 700 or 800 word job ad to find out what the salary is or whether I can work from home. And the other thing to make note about this particular example is that the first 2 bullet points have got nothing to do with salary and benefits. And this is where your employee value proposition and articulating that in your recruitment campaign is really important. I think your employee value proposition does include salary, does include flexible working, does include leave entitlements and any other benefits, but I think it's more than that. And I'll touch on that in a minute. So we've got audience-centric copy. If you're talking to your marketing team or a copywriter and it's direct response copy that you're looking for, a clear and early articulation of the purpose of the role, linking that to the purpose of the organisation and the members or communities that you support, and then a really clear and compelling offer that I don't need to read to the bottom of the job ad to see. And then there's just some quick screenshots of our social media content. So there's me, raw and ready, not in a studio, not in front of a green screen or anything like that, talking about the role that we were working on. And then we do various different things on social media. One of the things that we find has really good traction is a carousel or a slider. And so it's literally like a mini presentation that is the same content that's in the job ad, but obviously in a more bite-size context, which then obviously you can click through and read the full job ad. So that's just a couple of screenshots. I've got plenty of examples, and there are some great examples in the report. They're not heart campaigns. There's some examples in the report that I'm referring to about that are basically best practice in employer branding through our research. So there's a couple of single-page case studies there that you can check out. I think I shared a tip earlier, which is not on this slide, and that was about employee reviews. But here are my 2 top tips to get you started on improving your approach to recruitment and adapting your, I guess, the way you tackle this in the modern talent landscape. The first is to review your job ads, your career page, your social media, and your employee reviews. Is the content engaging? Is it authentic? Does it feature your employees and the voice of your employees? Does it inspire action? This is something that we work with clients on separate to recruitment. So ideally, it's something that you would do every maybe 18 months to 2 years to make sure that everything that you're saying about your organisation is not only authentic, but really compelling and engaging and inspiring action. And second, my second tip would be to really understand your offer. And again, I use the language of offer versus employer value proposition interchangeably. It's really the same thing. Can you articulate what that value proposition is? Is it compelling and is it authentic? What I'd also say about your EVP, and this again, if there's people and culture people in the team, this may be controversial. It's much more than a list of benefits. It's, I like to define it as the ecosystem of support, recognition, and value that you provide to your employees. It needs to be authentic, it needs to be compelling, but most importantly, it needs to be evidence-based. It is essentially why your people choose you and why they stay. And this is where, again, we're overlapping between attraction and retention. Asking your people, and I strongly believe it needs to be more than a survey. It needs to be qualitative, detailed research. And we've done this process a number of times with our clients as well. And this is where your EVP and your articulation of that can be, the voice of your employee can come through. That then can be amplified in videos or day in the life or snapshots or testimonials from employees. But the 3 or 4 or 5 lines of your employee value proposition and the key messages, I believe, needs to come out of research, and that's the best way for it to be compelling and authentic. So look, that probably could be a topic for a whole nother webinar, but I would encourage you to, I'll just go back to the previous slide, I'd encourage you to look at those 2 things, reviewing those aspects of your recruitment marketing presence and also having a really critical and honest look at your employee value proposition, but also how you articulate it when you need to hire, but as I said, also when you're not hiring. That's it from me. I would love to field any questions that might come through. I've got 2 slides here. The second last one is a link to some freebies that we've put together for you. There's a 1-pager on how to be, with some tips on how to be competitive in the era of talent. There's a summary of our research. So the summary of one section of the research, and then the third thing there, and all of these are under the same link. The third thing there is the full report, the research report that I mentioned. It's got case studies as well as both aspects of the research that I mentioned. I hope I didn't talk too fast, but look at that, I've finished just shy of 45 minutes. Thank you so much for joining, and I'd love to hear if anyone's got any questions.
And Cynthia, I've also dropped that link into the chat for everybody so that they've got quick, easy access also with your contact details. So please use the link. The resources are amazing. Do we have any questions for Cynthia? And again, I'm opening up if you do want to grab the mic. If not, that's okay. Seeing lots of celebratory hands, but we've got one question for you there, Cynthia. Jess is asking, what would you suggest is the first thing to do if you don't have capacity to do everything? Oh, that's a good one. That's an easy one. Talk to Cynthia.
I probably need to know a little bit more about, when you say capacity, the size of your organisation, how often you need to recruit, if you have turnover problems. There's probably a few other questions I would need to ask to qualify that. So I understand that small organisations, resources are absolutely a factor, whether it be actual budget or human resources. The clients that we work with, I think the smallest one has got 3 staff, up to about 100 people. So very, very familiar working with small organisations. Probably the answer to that question, Jess, depends on what your needs are in terms of the talent space. Do you want to jump in, and you can either pop it in the chat or you can turn your mic on and let me know more. Otherwise, we can talk offline.
I might connect to you and Jess if she doesn't come through.
Sure.
But I do know Jess has quite a medium-sized organisation. Okay. Oh, here we go. Happy to chat live. Okay. So, Jess, I am going to throw the mic over to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Cynthia. It's been great. My quick question is, well, I think it's quick, but it's probably not. Like you say, there's lots of other things to throw in there. So I'm recruiting for my team, or about to be, but our organization is just over 40 people. We don't have HR, we don't have recruiters or talent things, and the budget is always a bit small in terms of recruiting and things like that. So, and we don't have a careers page. As far as I know, we don't share anything on social media about our careers and things like that. So, and one of the things that we struggle with is getting quality people to apply for our jobs. We usually end up with 100, 200 people just doing it for their Centrelink requirements. So it's quite complicated. In terms of turnover, it's not too bad, actually. We're pretty good. We do have lots of good retention and people that stay for quite a long time. But it's just, finding the right people to fit in, and then how do we attract them rather than the crap, for want of a better term, that we get.
Yeah. Jess, do you have a marketing team or a comms or comms
We
person?
do have a marketing team, yeah.
So they might not like this because they're probably very busy, but I would, if attracting the right people or getting 200 inappropriate applicants is, common or a challenge, then I think you need to, where I would start would be reviewing how you position the role. So what does the job ad look like, or what was the previous job ad? Talking to it should be relatively easy to add a careers page, even if it's just very, very simple with less than 100 words of copy. And you might, the first step might just be to post that, some similar content that you're going to put in your job ad on that page, and then build it over time. It would be a lot harder to get started if you didn't have a marketing person. But I think this is where I believe people and culture teams, and if you don't have a HR team, the hiring manager, obviously the impetus for recruitment falls on them. This is where I think we need to be working with, ideally working with the marketing team. They are responsible for member engagement, and part of that is content and communications. So there is no reason why they couldn't turn their skills and experience to helping you communicate effectively with a talent audience. Obviously, that's something that we do all the time. I can see another question in the chat that's really relevant to this around the language and how you articulate. So there is, and that's something that we also do. Probably not on a single job basis, but doing that review of how you articulate, why I would want to come and work here, and how you get people excited and inspire action. Obviously, that's a separate project to recruitment. It absolutely supercharges and improves your recruitment outcomes. But I think if you're lucky enough to have a marketing person, that's probably where I would start, trying to corral them into helping you and getting your job ad right. If you're not going to run off into the sunset and start creating, digital content, if you don't have those resources, at the very, very least, a well-crafted job ad.
Thank you. That's amazing.
Have you seen the other question in the chat group, Cynthia?
Emma's saying she's struggling to write a job ad to attract someone to an admin role. It's support, and I find it really hard finding language that's attractive to an applicant, while being honest that the role is for supporting the work of a team. Emma, if you're still online, if there are other similar roles, support roles in your organisation, what you could do is talk to somebody else that does that work. And this is where we go back to the insight-led or the evidence-led, evidence-based comms. You don't... I think it needs to be authentic. There's no point trying to oversell something. And look, this conversation I've heard thousands of times, probably not so much recently, because as I said, things are more transparent and the dynamic is different. But plenty of times in the early part of my 19-year career, I'd heard people say, I'm looking for a new job because this job just really isn't what, they sold it to me as. That happens a lot less these days because of everything that we've discussed around, digital content and employee reviews and social proof. But if you've got somebody else in the team that does a similar role, perhaps you could talk to them about why they chose this role and why they enjoy working here, even if it's not exactly the same role. In terms of your challenge around attractive language, it is about balancing reality and authenticity with being engaging and compelling. But I'd probably seek some feedback from somebody else in the team and try and plug in, their sentiment or their language or their feedback into your ad campaign. Excellent. Emma's just responded in the chat. If there's, I'm happy to field any other questions. I know Anne just shared not only the link to those resources, but also my contact details. So what I didn't share, actually it's on the next screen, is please connect on LinkedIn if you want to follow Heart Talent's work. My LinkedIn profile is also not on that slide, but that's fine. I will. I'm connected to a lot of people in the Answers community, but happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. And you can, we've got heaps and heaps of free content that is hosted on our website and also through our social media. So as I said, we try and practice what we preach. I'd love to connect with you and have you follow us on LinkedIn as well. Thanks so much for joining, everyone.
Thank you, Cynthia. Absolutely fantastic. And look, for the questions that come after today, we're going to be sending a follow-up with a copy of this webinar. And again, with that link to download those fantastic resources. Thank you. That's so generous of you for sharing. And I am going to ask everybody, we do love a good survey. 60 seconds is all I'm asking for. When we finish up, can you give us feedback? Tell us how amazing Cynthia is. But in all seriousness, tell us what you thought, because we love hosting these learning webinars so that you actually get some really good takeaway content. We want you to be able to go away and start working on this. And if you do need a helping hand, you now know that Cynthia's here and she's definitely open to having a chat and seeing what she can do to help you. But Cynthia, thank you so much. And to everybody who's joined us today, have a fantastic day. And until next time, we'll see you then.
Thanks, everyone.